Right, I think now's as good a time as any to get started. So first and foremost, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be joined by several experts in the hospitality field with regards to bed and breakfasts, who are going to be here answering questions. We've got some pre-selected questions for the panel, but please, we would very much like if anyone has any specific questions they would like to have answered, or any questions from anything that is discussed beforehand, please add them to the chat function, and we will get around to them at the end. So I'm pleased to be joined here by Mark Foll from ASC Finance for Business. ASC have been raising business finance for over 50 years in the hospitality sector. David Weston from the Bed and Breakfast Association. He has over 30 years experience in travel and tourism, currently chairman of the Bed and Breakfast Association and a member of the government's Tourism Industry Council. He also received in September 2021 the Outstanding Contribution Award from AA Hospitality. And Ian Hardwick from eviivo, which is a leading all-in-one booking and property management platform for independent accommodation, has thousands of customers across the UK and beyond. So thank you all for taking your time to answer our questions this afternoon, and it's very much appreciated. I'd be very grateful if everyone else could keep their microphones muted during it, but as I said, please do add any questions into the chat if there's anything else you'd like us to cover. So we'll start off with Mark from ASC Finance. Mark, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Hopefully you can all hear me.
Now, obviously, getting finance is one of the major hurdles for anyone looking to buy a bed and breakfast. What is probably the most common question that clients ask you when it comes to raising finance?
By far, the most common question that I receive is, how much can I borrow? With commercial finance, it is very bespoke. So lenders do look at different aspects of an application, for example, the security involved in the transaction, the ability to repay back the debt, the contribution from the individual, and also the character, what's their background, what's their experience. To put a ballpark figure on it, lenders generally lend around about 65–75% loan to value, to put an actual figure on it. Do lenders lend to first-time buyers is another common question, and yes, they do.
And what do, if you're looking at purchasing a bed and breakfast, or what do you need? What do you need to have available to get the journey started?
Firstly, a property that you're interested in is a very good start, and then a lender would need at least, say, 2 years accounts for the target business, depending on the circumstances. But lenders may also require more up-to-date figures or evidence of future bookings, because that can also support an application as well.
Yeah. Do you necessarily need to have experience in that industry, or is it something that people can come from any walk of life and jump into?
Kind of touched on it just a second ago. So lenders do lend to first-time buyers, so no experience is necessary. A common theme actually seems to be a change in lifestyle, where husband and wife, for example, have been working. Say that the husband carries on working, the woman has a break, quits her job and focuses on the everyday running of the B&B. In fact, we've recently financed an ex-plumber, so he's completely quit the industry, and he's recently purchased a B&B, as it's always been a pipeline dream of his. So no, experience is not always the case.
Yeah, and how do people who are interested go about in finding the right lender to support them?
Well, there's many banks in the UK, in fact over 300 at the moment, and that always seems to be increasing with new lenders coming into the market. So it's a very good question, but unfortunately not all of these do offer commercial finance, and again, not all of them to the B&B sector. So the easiest thing to do is have a chat with a broker who's got experience in that industry as approaching these lenders, and knowing the lenders that do finance these type of transactions is key to obtaining the right finance.
Okay, and obviously the last few years have been a bit different with COVID and the impact it's had. Has that made it harder to get finance for bed and breakfast?
COVID has, of course, had an impact on the industry. Which business hasn't really had an impact? So unfortunately, the sector was hit. But moving forward, and now we've seen a massive increase in staycations. So it is a thriving sector now. Lucky enough, with commercial finance being as bespoke as it is, a number of lenders are allowed to use a common sense approach. So they would take into consideration factors like COVID and performance prior to COVID as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. David, you've come across and obviously helped hundreds of bed and breakfast owners through your role at the association and other initiatives. If someone is thinking of buying or starting a bed and breakfast, what are the first things they should consider? David, I think you're potentially a couple of years of COVID, but we still have the Zoom problems with the microphone.
Can you hear me now?
That's perfect.
I
Great,
needed
thanks,
to
David.
unplug and plug in again. Okay, the first thing we often say to people is, are you actually happy with the idea of strangers in your home? It seems odd, but people haven't always thought it through. They understand the idea of a bed and breakfast business, but really you need to think through how you're going to handle having, as I say, strangers in your own home. Some people are great with that. They're people, as it were. They're welcoming. They look forward to it. They like to meet new people. Others are, when they think it through, they think, actually, no, I'm not sure if that is for me. And we try to, in everything we do in this association, obviously save people expensive mistakes later. And the worst thing to do is put lots of investment in, launch a business, and then find 6 months later you really don't like it. You really don't like those people staying in your home. So that's one thing. It seems an odd thing to say, but not everyone thinks it all the way through. And are you, as the type of person you are you very well organized? Are you what you used to call house proud person? It's that type of person you need to be to think through, spot details, keep everything clean and tidy, looking beautiful, see when anything's out of place. If that's the kind of person you are, or think you can be easily, then great, you'll be good at running a bed and breakfast. If you're not so organized, then it's going to be a struggle, because you need to keep on top of everything, and you need to be very well organized with your diary and everything else. The worst thing you can have is something like a client coming where you've forgotten a booking or mislaid it or thought it was for tomorrow or last week or next week or whatever. So you need to be very, very well organized and very, as I say, house proud is a good word for it, really. So those are sort of key things we say at the very beginning.
And you mentioned you don't make mistakes. What are the sort of other most common mistakes that people tend to make?
Yeah, well, one is not being aware of all the rules and regulations, and there are an enormous number of them. And obviously that's one of the reasons the Bed and Breakfast Association is here. And we started back in 2006 when the fire regulations had just changed, and everybody had to comply with the fire regulations. Previous to that, you had to have a fire certificate if you were very large premises, but you didn't if you were smaller. So one of the most common things is not being aware of everything. And as I say, we want to try and help people avoid making expensive mistakes later. So it helps to be aware of all those rules and regulations, and that's one of the things we're here for as the association. The other thing, most common mistake to just briefly mention, I think it is, and because it's so important and so easy in a way, is a lot of people don't have enough or good enough photos on their websites. They don't, and that's just so crucial, to have really good photography to show off your place to its best possible effect. And we come across often people who have very small photos, fuzzy photos, dingy photos taken in the wrong light, not very flattering angles or whatever. That is not going to help you sell your property to a total stranger who's just looking at your property alongside hundreds of others, saying, where am I going to pay my money to go and stay? So really invest in fantastic photography. It doesn't have to be professional photography. If you do it well yourself and you've got the equipment to do it well yourself, but just do make sure you've got really good photos of your property.
Do you advise that people looking to embark on this journey have a business plan as one of their first steps?
Yes, very much so. It's it's essential, really. You don't have to have a huge 100-page detailed plan with graphs and charts and everything. That's not the key element of it. The key element of it is to have thought through the basics of your business model, basically, so that you've got the key factors about occupancy, price, and your fixed costs and your variable costs. Put those in, and then that will be able to test various questions like what kind of rough level of occupancy are you going to need to get to break even? What happens if you increase your prices by 10%? What difference will that make to your profit? What happens if costs are going up by this X percent, which they obviously are at the moment very much? What's that effect that's going to have? And so the plan will basically enable you to have a model to test those kind of things, look at different scenarios and understand the basics. I mean, if basically you find you're going to need 95% occupancy to break even, then something is drastically wrong, and obviously you need to rethink your plan. It's those kind of things you need to be testing in your business plan. As I say, you don't need to have an extremely long one that you're going to submit and get marks on in an exam. That's not the key thing. It's the thing is to just understand the basics of your business.
Okay, and how does one go about generating bookings?
Well, a couple of things we always remind people of is people don't always think of is to think through locally what's near your place. Are there local attractions, wedding venues, that kind of thing, even other B&Bs and hotels, and approach them and make sure, for instance, on the wedding venues, you're listed on the local accommodation there, that you've got, you do the same with attractions where you can, put them in your SEO on your website so that when people are searching for a certain attraction, maybe it helps your B&B come up in searches. Those kind of things. That's one area which not everyone thinks of. And the other thing is looking at a balanced approach with just several online travel agents, not just all eggs in one basket, but an approach. But I'm sure Ian's going to expand on those kind of areas. So, but those are two key things we mentioned.
Brilliant, thanks, David. Yeah, so Ian, if someone's going to want to start marketing their new bed and breakfast, what's the first thing that they need to be, or first things that they need to be doing?
Yeah, well, firstly, good afternoon, Joshua. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and thanks for inviting us on. It really is, there is just so much to take on, isn't there? Just listening to what we've heard so far. And I think avoiding expensive mistakes is something that we'd always really like to help with. Really interesting to hear some of David's points, because I would really echo some of those. In terms of the first thing to do to market your B&B, I mean, I guess that no one's going to know what it looks like. And so your shop window is your website. So that's where you really need to be making sure that you're looking good. You've got the information that people want to know about. It doesn't have to be an all singing, all dancing website. You don't need to invest thousands and thousands of pounds in it if you don't, but make sure that what you have got is quality, tells people where you are, what they can do locally, important things like, have you got car parking, what's included, what's not included, but especially images. Images is one of the #1 things we're always pushing people to sort out. For a couple of £100, you can get a local photographer to come and do a set of images. You could do them on your iPhone, that's certainly a possibility to take your own photos. If you're doing that, then do things like make sure you're not in the mirror, in the reflection in the bedroom. Make sure that you put the loo seat down. Maybe remove some of the cleaning materials from the shot. Remove the waste paper basket from the bedroom. Things like that. Things that you don't perhaps see because you're not seeing them as a guest, but having great photos for all of your bedrooms, each of the bathrooms, the shared dining areas, etc., the exterior as well. We often see places that don't have a picture of what it looks like from the outside, and that always makes me slightly suspicious. Gardens, if you've got any, don't really need lots of photos of the surrounding area. I know what the London Eye looks like, or Stonehenge, or this, that and the other. I don't need photos of that. I'd rather have photos of what's there. So photos, a decent website. And making sure that that website has online booking. I think it's a long time since people are sort of just willing to email or phone someone up to find out whether you've got, what your rates and availability are. And also, if you don't tell them up front whether you're available, when you're busy, you're going to have people contacting you constantly to say, can I have 2 nights for bank holiday weekend, when you've sold those months and months ago. If you have that availability up front on your website and it's transactional, then you're going to avoid the effort of having to sort of tell people that you're full when you're full, because they can see that, and they can also see when else you are available. So yeah, that I think to me is the key thing, having a decent website with good photography that's online bookable.
Okay, and you're talking about direct bookings. Is that how you advised new bed and breakfast to start?
Well, that's what everyone wants to get to, and I know David would agree with that, and that's what his members would want, and some of his most effective and best performing members are at that situation where they can rely on direct bookings, but that's taken them a long time to get there. You can't just have direct bookings. Nobody knows where you are, so they can't find you. So what we always say, again, like Dave was saying, have a mixture of your bookability on your own website, so people who do know who you are will book direct, but also be on the online travel agents. Now, most people will use Expedia, Booking.com, the main travel agent websites to find out what's available and what's in an area, and then they often use that to then go and find look directly for that property's own website. So if you're not on those sites, it's difficult to get that visibility. So and also, when you are on those sites, don't limit yourself to just 2 or 3 night stays. You might prefer to have a longer stay, but lots of people, when they first look on online travel agent sites, will just search for a random date to see what's available and what kind of prices there are. If you don't accept a 1 night stay, then you're not going to come up in those search results. So we always say to be on as many sites as possible, with as much flexibility in terms of dates. And you can always put the higher rate on for those single night stays. I always think it's, people cut themselves off from business if they think, well, I only want 2 night stay and I'm going to charge £200 for that. Well, why not charge £175 for a single night stay? Because if you've got a business person who needs to stay there, or someone coming to a wedding, and they only want 1 date, then insisting that they stay 2 or 3 nights when they'd be willing to pay the price but only stay 1 day is another thing. So sort of trying to think about where people are going to find you, really. So yes, direct bookings would be lovely, but it takes a little while to build up to those.
And you just touched on pricing. What's the best approach for a B&B owner?
I mean, you can make it as complicated as you want, but we always urge people to keep it simple. I mean, everyone's used to high season and low season, but that can vary across the board as to really what that means. I mean, most places in this country, high season's the summer, but if you're in a winter resort kind of place, then your high season might be different. You might have spring or autumn peaks. So think about when people are visiting, what day of the week people are coming to stay. Yes, you'd think that's going to be Friday and Saturday night, but if you've got lots of business visitors, then maybe a Sunday night is important as well, and they're not interested in a Friday. So if you've got relationships with local businesses and they're having people come to stay with you, then that's something to bear in mind. So just kind of look at when people are coming to visit, and don't be afraid really of charging a little bit more when you do have that demand, and lowering your prices at quieter periods, and thinking flexibly, like having a single night rate, a 2 night rate, and a 3 night rate, a way of trying to encourage people to extend their stay. I think also look at what your competitors are doing. That's easy to, and I've heard people before say, oh, well, when we opened our B&B, all of our neighbours said you'll never get more than £90 a night around here, and they burst through that and they set their rooms much higher than that. But what their proposition was quite different from what their competitors were doing. So just because everyone else is charging 90 doesn't mean you can't charge 120. But if you're going to do that, you need to be careful as to what your offering is. But if you've got a cocktail bar, you've got free parking, you've got additional services, you know, if you're sort of breaking the mold, you can maybe charge a little bit more for that. Or if you're offering you know, meals or something sort of different than lots of other people are doing, then you can perhaps charge a little bit more. And also, I think, make sure you set your prices far in advance. What we're in now, March, nearly April, so people are going to be thinking about their summer holidays. Not so many international visitors at the moment, but I think that's going to pick up. So make sure you've got your pricing set well in advance so that people can book a year in advance if they want to. Yeah, just make it have a system that allows you to update all of your rates and availability. Someone mentioned earlier about prices going up 10%. Well, you know, can you easily add 10% to your prices or add them for certain times a day? So have a system that sort of doesn't mean you have to completely unpick everything to try and do that. Okay.
And how should owners deal with cancellation? Should they be thinking about deposits? What's the best sort of structure?
Yes, I mean, again, it's a complicated area, but we'd always urge people to take a deposit for any booking. Again, David knows last year there was lockdown ease. There was lots of people saying, "Oh, I've booked, you know, 3 or 4 B&Bs, and if I get to my Spanish holiday comes through, I'll just dump all those and I'll go away." I think so making sure you've got you're taking some deposit from people up front, and making sure that your system supports card validation, and so you know whether that card is a valid one. Again, you know, it was practice last year. People would just put in a card number to kind of think, well, that's secured that booking. But if you know up front that card isn't valid, then you can go back to that potential guest and say, actually, I think you've put the card details in wrong. Sometimes that's a mistake, but sometimes that's not always the case. So make sure your system allows you to do that. Yes, always take a deposit. Allow people to pay up front when they book, or potentially let them when they check out pay online from the comfort of their room. COVID, I think, has taught us that people quite like the contactless element. Now, I mean, B&Bs are very much all about hospitality and face-to-face and that kind of interaction. But I think equally people quite like not having to queue up at reception to pay their bill, or feel that they're too close to others in the queue. So it's about flexibility, I suppose, making sure you've got something in the bag, and people can pay. And I guess one final point on that, then, you know, people want flexibility when it comes to bookings, and but you don't necessarily have to just give them a fully refundable rate. Why not charge more for your fully refundable rate, but a cheaper price for upfront, you know, full payment and no refund kind of thing. And then it's up to guests to decide what they want. So sort of think about what's useful for you, but that's going to attract guests and not scare them off, kind of thing. And I guess make sure, if you do have a policy, that you stick to it and that it's documented, so it is in your T's and C's, because people will say, "Oh, I know I booked the non-refundable, but then my dog was ill, or I got a flat tire, or whatever." If you can say, "Look, terribly sorry about that. You do have my sympathy, but this is what you've signed up for," kind of thing, and then stick to that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ian. We're happy to open the floor to questions. So if anyone does have anything they would like us to ask, please just type it into the chat function, and I'll ask away. I'll get the ball rolling on those. Is there any what's sort of the one tip or piece of advice you'd give to somebody who is looking at taking the leap and running a B&B? We'll start with Ian and work our way back around.
Well, I guess, yeah, do your research, make sure that it is for you, and once you've found your B&B and you know it's what you want to be doing, have a system that takes some of the pressures off for you. So do have online booking on your website, so you're not trying to work out who's paid what and who's owed what. Having a proper system is a bit like having an extra member of staff on your team. So I think it's really important that you sort of use the tools that you've got to help you run your business, to sort of free up time for more of what you're presumably going to be doing best, which is talking to people and giving them a lovely stay kind of thing, and more time to look after your guests, so that next time they book direct with you, and then you've got to that direct bookings that we were talking about earlier.
David, same question.
Yeah, I think I'd echo all that, and I'd say put yourself in the shoes of a potential guest, somebody who's going to book to come to that area, and say what would they be looking for. So try and think it from that point of view. What would you be looking for to as a place to stay, and then model your offer on what you want to do that's going to really be good for those guests and satisfy those guests. So try and put yourself in their shoes rather than think it from your business point of view. What are they looking for? Because there's going to be a lot of guests wanting to stay in that area. The other thing is relating to that. Some people say, we found this wonderful place. It's in the middle of nowhere. We love it. It's really fantastic. And that can be fantastic. That can be excellent. But be wary, because sometimes it's actually best to have a business in the middle of lots of other businesses. In a place where there's lots of B&Bs, because you'll know there is a lot of established marketplace for that town or village or area. So it's not a bad thing necessarily to have other competition next door, and it can be a bit of a challenge if you're in the middle of nowhere, very remote, very rural, to market that. So it's always a balance on everything, but just think that through.
Sure, thank you. Mark, what's the sort of one bit of advice you'd give to someone who's thinking about starting the journey?
It'd be an idea, kind of what Ian said, is to find a property you're interested in. Pick up the phone to a broker is sometimes quite a good conversation to have if you can get the finance in place before you're putting in an offer on some of these. So, like I say, find a property, pick up the phone to a broker, and get the ball rolling that way.
Great. We'll give it another minute or so if anyone does have any questions. But I would like to just say a big thank you to Mark, David and Ian for taking the time out this afternoon for this webinar to go through those questions. That was very invaluable advice, so thank you all very much. We will try and make this webinar available online for anyone who's missed it, so do hope that if you're watching it at a later date you can do so. And yeah, I think we'll wrap up there then. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time, and have a very good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.